I want to talk about the 3 elements of being a man in today's society. And that is being a provider, a protector, and being present, which I learned from our friend Janelle. And I as much as I was a fan of Boys to Men, End of the Road, Down on Bended Knee, at some point those boys needed to become men. And I think that's sort of the premise of what we're doing here. I started this show, everything we talked about here on SOSCast is make money, being a provider. Okay, cool. Then I said, all right, in order to make money, then you can have status and women and all the byproducts of all that. All right, great. Now you're a protector and you're being present for women. But ultimately what we're solving for here is, what does it really take to be a man in today's society? And I want to start with the concept of being a provider. After all, this is a financial type show, so we'll start there. So by the way, shout out to the Art of Manliness. They've got a lot of this information on their awesome website. So here's the traditional definition of a provider, and then we'll have this conversation. So the definition of a provider is that the man typically is the breadwinner. He has a good job, earns steady income, provides food, shelter, and lifestyle for his wife and family. But it goes beyond the paycheck, right? And a man also must have a vision for the family, must have leadership, must sort of have like a get on board and follow me mentality. It's more than just making money. It's, I know where I'm going, jump on the train, we're going this way, I got money, I've got a vision, I've got leadership, and all this, I have a plan, I'll strategize for this, let's do this. So I think that is a very important caveat, that it's not just money being the breadwinner, it's also being the leader. What I want to ask you ladies is, what do you look for in a provider? And in many cases, do you look at yourself as the provider, today? Why don't I start with you, Linda?
Did you mean to say, like, what do you look for in a guy?
Yes.
Okay, so...
As a provider.
As a provider.
Yeah.
Okay.
And or because some women, let me just rephrase that. Some women will say, well, I don't need a man to be a provider. Right. I'll do my own thing. I don't need a man to pay my bills, bring home the bacon. Right. And fair enough. Some women are like that. Some women will say, no, hell no. I want a man to be a provider. Yeah. What do you think is a good balance in a relationship?
For me, I want a man to be a provider. Like, I want to be a stay-at-home wife. That's what I saw my mom do. That's what I saw my grandma do. That's what I've seen every woman in my family. They're happy. They're content. One thing that I noticed, like, with my mom and grandma, is that they never say, like, oh, what is my purpose? Like, I'm looking for purpose. Like, a lot of millennials and Gen Z, like the newer generations say, like, they need a purpose. Like, for them, the purpose was having kids. So for me, that's pretty much it. Like, I want someone who's going to be able to provide so I can homeschool my kids. Because I'm in the conservative world, I see a lot of what goes on in schools, what they teach children, the indoctrination with the LGBT, the race stuff. And so I don't want my kids to go through that education, right? Let's say that I marry someone who has a good income, but they can't pay for private school that's like $50,000 a year, then I want to be the person to teach my children. So
if the man is the provider,
yeah.
Speak numbers for a second. Do you want him to provide 100% of the income?
Yeah.
80%? The whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay. And then your role will be the housewife, the homemaker, the caretaker. That, you believe that is the perfect role?
Yes.
And so are you saying that a woman shouldn't necessarily have a purpose or a passion, or that should be the role of motherhood?
So this is where I'm kind of like torn. Like, I'll be honest, because there are some women that I know that did that and they are not happy. So it makes me wonder, like, okay, well, what is the situation here? Some people will argue that just having kids and being a housewife is going to give you purpose. But what about those women that did it and they don't feel fulfilled? So I wish I had all the answers. I think that I'll be happy if I can help my husband as well with his, let's say he has his own business, can I be his PR person? Can I be his social media manager? I feel like there's skills that we have now, especially with the internet, that we can like work from home, right? Or like have a side business or help him.
All right, last question on this, and then I want to get Kayla's response. You said you're in a relationship right now or no?
No.
Okay, so let's say you're an attractive woman. I assume you have no shortage of suitors, and you're probably, not settling, I would assume. are you going to be upfront with the guy on dates and say, hey, look, I'm Linda. This
Yeah.
is what I'm looking for. If you can't do the X, Y, and Z, I ain't the girl for you. How soon do you say that to a man when you're dating?
So that's actually what happened with the last partner that I had. I would say like COVID, like 2020, 21. And he didn't believe in that. He was a so-called traditional guy, Christian guy, conservative, allegedly. But he was like, what do you mean? Like, you want to be like, you know, like you don't want to be 50-50. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that.
50-50.
Yeah. And I was like, what?
Days, by the way.
Like, there's no way. So that was like really, like, at first we were friends. So it was a different kind of situation. We didn't just start dating from the beginning.
Yeah.
A friendship turned into that. But I assumed, I guess it was bad on my part, that because he had these values, because he was a traditional guy, because he was a Christian, because he was conservative, he would be okay with that. And so once we had that conversation, I was like, okay, like, I don't really think this is going to go anywhere, because I'm not going to be working, taking care of the house, cleaning the kids.
Yeah.
Like, and I genuinely, I don't want to give my kids to the state.
Well, I'll say this.
That's like a really big deal for me.
I think that's a very good point, what you're saying, the date that you're on with this man. I think also part of the definition of being a boy versus a man are the types of conversations you have with the people you're dating.
Yeah.
So, for instance, when I'm in my 20s, you're in my 30s, the last thing I'm talking to you about is how are we splitting the bills? You know, what is life going to look like when we have kids? All these like deep philosophical life conversations. I'm like, where are we partying? Where are we going out? I'm trying to get you drunk. Like when you're trying to get just laid, so to speak. But when you're solving for a significant person in your life, a wife, a spouse, whatever it is, all of a sudden the conversations get elevated. And I think that's very important, that the words that are coming out of your mouth and being intentional. So for you, I'd rather you have that conversation,
right.
Maybe not the first date, Linda, but sooner in the relationship, rather than 2 years in, you're having fun and dating and you're like, so it's time to get serious. And next thing you know, you find out that your man wants you to split the bills with them 50-50. You're like, what just happened? Now you just lost 2 years of your life because you weren't intentional with your conversations. And that is also an element of being a boy or a girl versus a man and a woman, having these essentially difficult conversations. I don't know if it was like she was coming at you a little bit, our friend Linda over here, but she said, you know, you talked about having purpose in your life, and you didn't find purpose in your life until you were 25, although you had your daughter when you were 19. So how do you grapple the purpose, what she's kind of saying of motherhood and the role of motherhood, what Janelle speaks so highly of, but separately in the business world, finding your purpose at 25, 26 in the entrepreneurial space?
Well, I think that as we are little kids, we all have some type of desire in our hearts for something. Who's to say that her purpose is better or worse than mine? It's my purpose. It's her purpose. Like, let her do her. I'm going to do me because that's going to fulfill me. Her purpose is not going to fulfill me. It's different, right? So, you know, and I love what you talked about with vision and a man with vision. Like, yes, you know, it doesn't matter. I've dated, you know, I've dated a lot. I even had one point in my life where I hadn't dated, and I grew up in a very, very strict home. I wasn't allowed to do anything, so I completely rebelled. And one point in my life, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to date. I was like, I'm going to go on a bunch of dates for a year. That's all I did, a bunch of first dates. I think one guy got to like 2 or 3 dates, but everyone was a first date.
Everyone was
first date. And
you know what that sounds like, by the way? A lot of free meals.
Sounds like a guy.
You know, and I honestly, it was that, right? Because it was so much trauma that I had been through to where there was protective mechanisms to try to make me be in a masculine role.
Well, yeah,
don't understand
That's
exactly
something a guy would do, like first date, hit it, quit it. I'm not saying you did that.
No,
at
no,
all.
hit it, quit it.
I was not saying that at all, but it's just very masculine.
It was very masculine.
It was masculine of you.
It was.
Yeah,
It was
so
masculine.
you're admitting that.
Dates. Yeah, she
absolutely.
admitted it.
I was hurt. I was a hurt little girl.
Okay, so
1000%.
please, thank you for bringing this
Of
up.
course.
Go deeper a little bit. You're going on all these first dates.
Yeah,
you
this
took a
was
year to do it.
This was years ago.
Give an amount of how many first dates? 10, 20,
Over 100.
50?
Over 100.
Over 100?
Yeah.
I told you.
Kayla,
that's
you went on
very-
100 first dates in a year?
Yeah.
Wow.
I did. And it was really bad. Like, in my brain, super analyst, I had like charts. Like,
I believe it.
Yeah. It was super
You
masculine.
have to have that to
And-
go on that many dates. There's a movie about it. I forget.
Yeah.
50
Yeah, it's called 50 First Dates with Adam Sandler.
There's
What's going on
there's
right now?
another one. There's another one where
Yeah, the round 2, 100 first dates with David Spade.
I'll think of it. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
this is what happened with that, because I had never been on dates before. I always was like, my daughter's father, and then I dated one other guy. Well, and I was married. My husband was alcoholic, very physically abusive. I almost died. And I never had dated before. I was so hurt. I'd been through a lot. And so, yeah, it was a masculine energy trying to keep me safe. And I was just like, I want to learn. I was in a state of curiosity. It was starting with dinner, and then they all got annoying. So I did coffee. I did a lot of coffee dates. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about men and how they thought and what they were thinking and how to communicate. And it was just really interesting. Learning about men, because I was always sheltered, so I didn't know anything about men.
Wow.
And after that, I was able to get into a serious relationship for a little bit, and I started to understand how to talk to him and how to acknowledge him and make him feel important, and all this stuff that I didn't know about. My parents didn't teach me anything about. I had to learn on my own. And then from there, I've been single for the past 2 years, and finally meeting this man. And 2 years ago, the love of my life supposedly left me and moved across the country, moved to another country, and was just like, Miami, I am partying too much here. I know I told you that you're the love of my life, but bye. Just
What?
devastated. Yeah. Broke my heart. And then I went through a lot of, trauma healing and stuff from there, did a really intensive program for about 4 months. And I was like, you know what? I loved him more than I loved myself. And so for the past 2 years, I was like, you know what would it look like if I loved me? Truly loved me, loved myself enough to do the work, loved myself enough to, not have my ego die, just a million cuts of my ego over and over again. And what do I not know? Where am I still broken? Where do I get to heal? Where am I trying to protect myself? Where do I get to surrender? That was the word of the year. Surrender into my femininity and be okay feeling safe, because I didn't feel safe for such a long time.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
And your stories, I don't talk a lot about my stories simply because it's none of anyone's business, and I really like to focus on where I am now. But I grew up in a cult and had a very traumatic childhood, and did my own spiritual journey, obviously, in the ashrams in Thailand and India. But when you say you were wounded and never, I grew up in, skirts and dresses up to here, down to here. I grew up as a missionary, so we were excluded from the outside world. I had no connection with television, magazines, nothing. And so I didn't know anything. So when I can relate to a lot of what you're saying, but I'm just curious, because you said I didn't know about dating, and my parents never taught me. Same. But I never had a desire to go out and date a ton of men. And I'm just curious how you said I didn't feel safe. So I went out on a bunch of dates with strange men. How does that make you feel safe? That just doesn't make sense to me. And no shade, I'm just curious.
Yeah. No, I think it was me trying to overcome fear. I even had my roommate at the time, and I would send her a pineapple emoji for her to come come get me. But I was just trying to explore and trying to prove to myself, I can do it. I was I don't want to be alone. I want to be able to do this. And I would literally have panic attacks. If I walked into a store and a guy accidentally bumped me, I would start bawling my eyes out and panic attack. It would happen at work. Panic attack. I couldn't breathe. And I was so mad at my body for having trauma reactions to men that I was I'm going to heal this and I'm going to face it. And it was super uncomfortable, but I wanted to learn and I wanted to heal it, and I wanted to not break down in front of a guy that I didn't know. So I think that I was just trying to find my own weird way of healing it.
I was just so curious. I was I just don't associate not feeling safe with going out with a bunch of random strangers. For
I want to revisit that, and thank you for that, Janelle, because that's the perfect segue to this. It was after going on these 100 dates, was there one uniform lesson you learned about men in general? I know blanket statements aren't easy, but if you could finish this sentence, all men or most men want blank.
I think that most men don't get the opportunity of really being seen by a woman.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So what does that mean? Meaning that men aren't able to even get those first dates?
No, not that. Just I feel so many of us women were taught to where men need to earn our attention and our affection and everything else, right? You need to earn it. And I feel men marry their wives who originally act like that, but that would require a sense of vulnerability for myself to lower my guard and see you and honor you for who you are at this very moment, versus you need to prove yourself So I think that was the consensus, because like if I could really just sit with somebody that I didn't know, get super uncomfortable and allow myself to drop my guard and be vulnerable, even though I felt so bad, and just really make them feel seen and appreciated, and really ask questions. And I want to know about you, and I'm in a state of curiosity. Like I found that those conversations, like I would just like, oh, like they're really interested in me. And I'm like, well, what did I do? I'm really curious as to what, I just treated them like they're important.
You were curious about them.
Yeah.
Well,
Men will go for their entire life and remember that time that some random old lady told them they looked cute. They'll remember that for like 40 years.
Men
will remember a compliment forever. Because men don't get that kind of attention.
Unless they do some kind of accolades.
Dude, you are so accurate with that. Do you remember the first time that someone, like I remember being 22 and I was hired, my first job was a sales job, and I was the only guy. It was me and a bunch of girls, like 6 girls. If you girls are watching, you know I love you. Like my homegirls. And one of them came up to me, she goes, Adam, you're cute now, but you're going to be really handsome when you grow up. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess
you still remember it.
I still remember when she said I was in the hallway right there. Still to this day, I was like, I got something to look forward to.
Yeah,
wow.
It gave you that.
And look at me now.
You're pretty cute.
So, thank you.
But that's the difference.
I think you're
But
right
that's the difference
with that.
between, fundamentally, the difference between men's self-esteem and women's self-esteem. Well, men's self-esteem has to be self-esteem. It has to come from within you, because the external world is not really going to tell us we're amazing and we're pretty and all this sort of stuff. Whereas women are constantly,
all the time.
but you're constantly validated by the external world on your beauty and your value.
And that's why men are success objects and women are beauty objects.
Exactly.
This is why we invited 3 beautiful women on the panel, not three
ugly ones.
So if you like that clip, click right here to watch another, or if you want to watch the entire SOSCast, click right here.